Welcome to the Growler, a Who Dat podcast hosted by Paul Dana and other bald friends like Mo Egger, Dave Nanametz, home of all your Bengals breaks, takes. Welcome to the Growler.
All right, welcome into the latest edition of Balds Don't Lie. Paul Dana Jr. here with you. It is a special day here at the Growler. So it's a time for a special setup here. Jay Morrison, Mo Egger, both with me. Jay, what's going on?
Hey, you're right. It is a special day. I love the way that the emails and the tweets start coming in before you drop this thing. And when's it coming? When's it coming? And everything else in the NFL is it goes to a direct calendar. Everybody knows when the schedule's coming out and this and that, and nobody knows when the mock off season's coming, and you get to surprise them on a Wednesday.
We teased it. We teased it a little bit. People were getting a little antsy. People were wondering when it was going to come. But I appreciate the clamoring for mock off season. It is mock off season day. Mo, how are you feeling? Are you defeated, or are you doing okay with this?
Well, let's see. I like to print stuff, right?
Yeah,
I did. I did this right late. Here, can I hold on? Late last night after the Bearcat debacle, and I thought, cool, put that to bed. And then I realized I had too many draft picks, and so I ended up settling on a fourth version. So this took some time. What I want to know is this: how every year you'll hear these stories next week, how much productivity is lost to the Super Bowl because people apparently can't work and acknowledge that there's a football game coming up, or the NCAA tournament. Like, here's how much productivity is lost during the NCAA tournament. How much productivity in the greater Cincinnati area will be lost because people are spending precious work, resources, and time working on the mock off season.
I hope a lot.
I hope
that'd be a big point of pride for me. If
Yes.
if I could be responsible in some way for a lack of productivity. I mean, I've had that personally my whole life, but to now distribute that to others, I would love that. That would be a real point of pride for me.
Well, the thing is, if at work you gave me a spreadsheet to work on, I would quit. And yet this I could not wait to dive into, and I did deep into the wee hours of the morning.
Yeah, I did a little bit last night as well, also taking in the Bearcat debacle. I will not make you talk about that. Okay. I don't want you to have to go any further down that road. I know that you will probably, if I'm guessing, this afternoon from 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530.
We might do a mock off season for the Bearcats. Who knows?
Yeah. I think I know where a lot of fans are starting. All right, so I do want to touch on a couple bits of news, and Jay and I will expound on this a little bit more afterwards. We're going to spend most of our time today kind of going through the mock off season sheet. If you don't know, we do this every single year, and it kind of lays out the entire off season in front of you. But more importantly than anything, it's not sign this guy, sign that guy, sign everybody, do everything. We try to do what Duke Tobin will be so thrilled about. We try to show you the pie. Okay. You take away from one, you got to give it to the other, vice versa. It's all about showing what the constraints are, how much you can actually do, and what that looks like. The last 3 years in a row, I'm very proud of this. The last 3 years in a row, the final moves the Bengals have made have ended up within $4 million of this template when we originally constructed it. So it's proven. This is a proven template that has worked. Mostly because the Bengals are so damn predictable. Okay, like they use the cap like it's a real cap. They don't tend to do all the restructures and the crazy moving. You know who couldn't do this? The Saints. Terrell would throw this thing away in a second. Be like, none of this matters. She has her own math problems that she has to deal with. She spends more time with spreadsheets and cap sheets than I certainly do. But the Bengals' straightforward nature and how they do a lot of this stuff makes it so you can have a real feel for what they can and will do, both historically and what you can expect with what's on the market this year. It's not perfect. We try to get it as close as we can in terms of free agents and cost. This year is particularly challenging with the potential of the extensions and how they could structure that, and Burrow maybe moving money around. It changes a little bit of things, but the whole cash element we can't really get into that they're going to deal with this year. But I think it's still very much the same type of thing that we've seen in recent years. The news items that Jay and I will get into, I reported this yesterday. Erick All is going to miss the 2025 season. His ACL that he tore on November 3rd actually is going to require 2 surgeries instead of 1 due to what complications that he had from the one at Iowa where he tore his ACL in 2023. This had marked 3 straight seasons. His season had ended early due to injury. That was kind of the concern with him coming out, but he's going to miss the 2025 season. So tight end, they rebuild there as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Al Golden was introduced earlier this week. In case you hadn't heard us talk about Al Golden enough into microphones, it was the longest, hey, we know who the guy is in the history of searches. I talk about Al Golden for 3 weeks now. So yes, he did speak. We'll talk a little bit more things, takeaways that we had from that on Monday, but I don't think there's any need to bore you. If you want to, Charlie and I on Monday went deep into Al Golden, his defense, what to expect, who are kind of the winners and losers on the amongst the Bengals roster there in terms of what Al Golden likes to do. So you can go listen to that for some more there.
Can I ask a question really quick? There's a lot of Al Golden content, and I've enjoyed it all. I really have enjoyed it all. But
you've contributed?
I have contributed. Has Dejon Anthony done a TikTok yet about this hire? Because
can someone get him to say if this was who he was referring to?
Because I don't know that I was shocked. Dejon Anthony told me I was going to be shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked when he was on the field on 4th and 16. That's a different story.
Yeah.
But this didn't shock me. And so I'm curious as to whether or not Dejon Anthony is going to address the shock value or lack thereof with the Al Golden hire.
Well, I don't know. What's the update? Is TikTok's back?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, so maybe if he got the news that TikTok's back, then maybe you can go on there, Mo, personally, and just kind of keep an eye out for it.
I'm good. I'm hard pass on that one.
Hard pass on that. Here's how I want to do this. We all did sheets, okay? And again, for the uninitiated, it has the whole. I don't go to the whole roster. You basically have the most important, the critical 2 deep, the most rotational players. It ends up being 33 players, including 3 specialists that end up on there. And there's kind of decisions to be made this year on almost everybody. The defense, you have Logan Wilson. I had him set because he has too much dead money. They're not going to cut him. And Al Golden thinks he's the bee's knees. And so he's kind of the centerpiece there. Everybody else needs a decision. Everybody else, you got to figure something out. There's a ton of cuts available this year. There's a lot of options, I think, with some, extra pieces on offense. You have the whole Tee Higgins, Trey Hendrickson decision is fascinating. There's a lot to touch on here. We'll bring in our answers here in a minute, but I want to start. Let's just kind of go through it together and talk through kind of where we started. And what we did. So if you're following on the YouTube channel, you get the glory of watching us actually do this on the screen. But of course, for everyone that listens to the podcast, you'll be able to understand what we're talking about as well. Mo, let me ask you this. Where did you start?
That right-hand column where it says cuts.
Yeah.
I went to work, man.
Yeah.
I went to work. I am wary of the political climate that we are in. But if you've paid attention to what's going on in Washington, whether you like it or not, there are a lot of people being let go. That's kind of what I did here with a lot of guys in that right-hand column. I got the machete out. I went to work, and nothing against any of these players, and some of whom have meant a lot to this organization. I needed to free up money. I needed to move on from guys who I just either think have their best seasons behind them or don't have very high ceilings or might be easy to replace. And so I went to work. We've done this exercise, for years, and I've never really done that. I've never really started with cuts. This would be unprecedented in the history of this franchise, as you guys well know, if they did what I did, because I cut 7 players.
Yeah.
And I saved nearly $45 million in the process.
Yeah.
And look, some tough decisions because, there are some players that you might go, God, that guy might still be able to help a team. And there are some players who have meant a lot to this organization, but this was cost cutting. This was cold. This was heartless. But it also felt kind of good because it was the team last year wasn't very good. And at some point during the season, I complained about each one of these guys. So I got my revenge. I cut them on the spreadsheet, and I saved a lot of money in the process.
Let's go through some of the. I mean, is there any? I mean, I think the ones that are undeniable are Sam Hubbard at the $9.6 million coming back to you. Now, there's an option to restructure Sam Hubbard that's in the edge columns, so you can come back to that later. I put that at $3 million. That felt like a fair compromise number. You know, if Sam wants to keep playing here, I feel like that's where it would land. My guess there. So cut Sam Hubbard at 9.6. Sheldon Rankins, I mean, I was just going to put it in there as an automatic cut where you didn't even need to choose it, I thought, but 8.6 obviously coming back there. Alex Kappa is going to happen. $8 million. That's a lot of money. In your replacing guard, you obviously need a new guard. Then I think it gets a little more interesting, guys. Where did you land in the Geno Stone? Jermaine Pratt, I think, is probably maybe potentially in the obvious, but maybe Al Golden comes back and has nice things to say about Jermaine Pratt. I did note that he did not say Jermaine Pratt's name once in his opening press conference, which did last a half an hour.
Yes, more than a half hour.
31 minutes to be exact. Thank you very much.
I'm right there with you. I started at the cuts, and I initially kept Jermaine and Geno, and I as I started filling in the other side, and I went to defense first. I almost always start on the offense and go down that way, but I started with the defense, and I just got to the point where kind of what Mo said. I think the limited ceiling. I don't know that you're going to say Geno and Jermaine are definitely going to be grossly overpaid, but those spots need upgrades, and whether it's free agency, the draft, whatever you do, you don't need to be paying. I think those guys are more suited to be depth guys this year, and you can't pay a depth guy that kind of money. So I only went 6. Mo, you said 7. I'm guessing you cut Cordell Volson.
Yes.
I held on to him, but I cut the other. I cut the 6, the 4, the 3 that you said were most obvious. I also cut Zach Moss, and then the 2 on defense, Geno and Jermaine. Just for that reason, right? I don't know that you want to rely on them as starters this year, and you definitely don't want to pay them that kind of money to be depth guys.
I kept taking Geno Stone off the shelf and putting him back on as I did this, because I wrestled with what I'm going to do in the secondary, because they do need better safety play. They do need better cornerback play. Where am I more likely to get that from guys who were here last year? I ultimately settled on corner, where, you know, for me, it was, when I printed it out, it was kind of startling. It's like, man, I brought all those guys back in at the corner position. But there, as I was trying to find upgrades on defense, and really it was about defense, as I was trying to find upgrades and balance some things I wanted to do in this exercise in free agency, there were a couple of times where I kept coming back to Geno and telling myself, well, you know, I was excited that they signed him, and he did play well at the end of the year. And, you know, do I hold it against him? The fact that he had one bad 3/4 of a season, when up to that point he kept ascending. And then I kept thinking of the missed tackles and the bad angles and the relatively low ceiling. Look, he did a great job in Baltimore of putting himself in a position to get paid by the Bengals. It's a former 7th round pick. Right. You know, at the end of the day, even if he's better in 2025, is he going to be dramatically better? Is he going to remind anybody of the safeties they've had over the last couple of years? No. So I ultimately settled on cutting him, but that was the one guy. None of these other players that I screw with once I cut them. Geno Stone, a couple of times I put him back on the team before ultimately, cutting him.
I mean, I think it's, you know, I think it's possible that Jermaine Pratt is back. But I still think it's more likely that Geno Stone is back amongst those two. So I'll put Pratt here in this in the cut category. I just feel like there's too many other options to restart with next to Logan Wilson, and it just has not felt right with Jermaine Pratt there all year long. And the fact that we haven't really heard his name, despite Al Golden knowing him, having coached him earlier, that just feels like too big of a signal. And I just think they can do better. I just think they can do better at that position in both free agency and linebacker, especially when you look at the line. I mean, I feel like the linebacker, when you went in there and through free agency, some nice names, some solid names that you feel really good about that could come in and play next to Logan Wilson. Zach Moss, I feel like the neck thing is too weird to bring that back. And there's again you can get some very much similar type of play is what you got to Zach Moss. And again, this person is not going to be featured. So to save $3.5 million on somebody who's going to be a 20%, 15% running back or a fail safe seems like a little much when there's questions there, and it wasn't all that productive last year. The Volson thing I think will play out over camp. I mean, they can hold on to him on the rookie contract. It's just that number's big. It's going to be similar to Jackson Carman last year in that, come in, and if you're better, if you can win it, if you can win that job, that $3.6 million can be yours, but they're watching that thing closely. You better not be the last guy on the roster for 3.6 or it's going to be chop time. And for that case, I'll put him in the chop here. But that would come later. Geno Stone being the question. So for right now, let's leave Geno Stone out of it. Where did you go when you went into the roster? Did you just go right through an offense and was that kind of just start on offense, or did you go to the defensive side of the ball and say, let's gut this thing first?
I started on offense because I felt like I was going to have to devote more time to defense. So there were a handful of things I knew I wanted to get done. I wanted an early draft choice on the offensive line. Everybody's going to say, well, they're not going to take a guard in round one. So I sort of automatically slid in at one of the guard spots, a second-round pick. So I started right there, and I actually started with the Jamar Chase extension. I started there, and then I go second round at guard, and then I go Mike Gesicki, and then I just did Tee Higgins because I just wanted to see what. All right, I wanted to wrap my brain around what the green dollar amount there did. And I'll admit with Tee Higgins, I kind of went back and forth. I went back and forth with Tee Higgins, and I went back and forth on wide receiver 3. I ultimately kept Tee, and I used a third-round pick on a wide receiver, which we could talk about. But I did that. I did the offense pretty, relatively speaking to what I did on defense, I did that pretty quickly and pretty comfortably. I left RB2 blank until I got to the defense because then I wanted to see what I had left over and who might fit. But offense for me, because I knew like they need offensive line upgrades. And if they're ever going to have an elite offensive line, that's going to be built through the draft. At the same time, there is something to build with here. I mean, if you look at what I did, I have a second-round pick at right guard, and I put Cody Ford at left guard. I have, for an offensive line that we talk about needing to be retooled, 4 of the 5 players I have were on the team last season. If Cody Ford is the left guard for this team, I think I'm comfortable with that. And I would imagine Joe Burrow would be comfortable with that. Also, if TikTok does go out of business, Cody Ford's family is going to need the money. So I started on offense, ultimately kept T, and then circled back at the end when I needed to find the running back too. But that's where I started because I felt like I knew going in some of the things I wanted to accomplish.
Yeah, I was the opposite. I started on defense. I feel like that's the number one thing that needs to be fixed on this team. I don't think just hiring Al Golden is enough. And I didn't go straight to defense. I went a little bit lower from the cuts, and I traded Trey Hendrickson.
Wow.
The kind of the theme of my sheet is righting wrongs, and I'm not saying that Trey Hendrickson is a wrong by any stretch, but look where he is age-wise. Look what he's been in the past where he's threatened holdouts or requested trades and constantly wanting extensions. And he's right. He deserves it. I don't know that they're going to pay a defensive lineman on the other side of 30 the kind of money he's looking for. It's righting the wrong of Geno Atkins and Carlos Dunlap and going back to that in 2018 more so than anything. It doesn't say anything about Trey, but you get another second round pick to fix some of these other, and then I spent money in free agency on the edge position and D tackle to kind of boost up that defensive line. I'm with you, Mo. I kept the secondary mostly the same. You know, that you've got too many high draft picks in there on rookie deals to just cut bait and bring in a veteran corner, yet maybe a veteran corner to be a depth piece, but not a starter. I did go with a rookie at safety. I think everybody out, most people that fill out the sheet are probably going to take Xavier Watts from Notre Dame in the second round and plug him in there. But the theme of righting wrongs goes through my entire sheet, and it's cutting Sheldon Rankins. That was a wrong decision. It's cutting Geno Stone. That was a wrong decision. I'm not saying Jermaine Pratt was a wrong decision. That was actually a right decision. The way they structured that, where they can get out of it now with minimal dead money. But that's what I did. I went with the cuts. Then I went down. I traded Trey Hendrickson. I started filling in the guys I wanted to piece in on this defensive line. But at the same time, I hopped over to offense real quick and did Jamar and Tee. I did a T extension and I did a Jamar extension. I figured those need to happen. I'm thinking they will happen. So I did that, and then I started saying, where do I want to allocate my free agent money? And I was surprised I was able to get the quality of players I am on defense and still fix that offensive line with some free agents as well.
Yeah, the hard part here is now in terms of, because people were like, look, I'm extending Jamar and it's not showing up with any money. Well, probably his cap number for this year, actual cap number, is probably not going to change. I mean, he's on the 5th-year option. Similar, Burrow was 29 last year. That was his 5th-year option. When you have that, you can then the extension technically starts in 2026 beyond that. They could even structure it where his cap number comes down this year if they really want it to be about cap. The cash is going to be a part of the thing that they fight there with all of the cash outlay you have to drop to do T and Jamar, plus what you're still giving in cash to Joe Burrow. The good news for them is they have plenty of cash available. They're in the bottom 5 in 2026 in terms of cash currently allocated. You can do it. I mean, there's ways that they can do that. They have plenty of cash. They are a professional football franchise, okay? And don't let them tell you otherwise. They have cash available to do this type of stuff that they want to do. That said, from a cap perspective, it's easy. Like it's not a hard button to push to go out there and do this. And yeah, Tee Higgins comes in and you take the $23 million. Now that's at 23. A reminder that all of these numbers are not what you're going to see in an average annual value. I don't think T's going to be a $23 million average annual value. We put the first year cap number on these deals in at about 20% lower than the average annual value for the entire contract, because that is how they have structured their deals almost across the board in recent years. That's how we get to these numbers, and that's how we've been able to get it, pinpoint accuracy on the end game sheet. So that puts T this year potentially at 23 million. I could see his average annual value being up around 30 if he signs in free agency, and maybe the Bengals drop a 25 mil, 26.7 mil per year on him, and he takes it. That's probably where this thing ends up if it's him. I just, acquiring the picks is really interesting, because especially if you do what Jay did and trade Trey Hendrickson, this draft, when you open up the draft section of Dane Brugler's mock draft, and if you're paying attention to the Senior Bowl, which is going on this week, there's just so many good defensive linemen. It is stocked. Daniel Jeremiah had this insane number of defensive linemen in his top 50 that just came out this past week. That's kind of the early read on this draft. You can add more picks. Specifically, they're talking about this being really strong in the 20 to 60 this year in the draft in terms of the players, and not as good in elite talent. You can add more picks in that middle, go to town. Theoretically, let's just say theoretically, you traded T and Trey. And you now had 3 picks in that second round range, maybe even higher than that, depending on what you get. I mean, you can really throw some serious dudes at the defensive line and make that thing look like the Rams or like the Eagles, who are out there with all these young defensive linemen hunting the quarterback going forward. You can do that. It was a really fascinating option when you went that way, because it does. It clears money. It clears room to put draft capital in and throw a bunch of picks at it.
So I ultimately kept Trey. Now, there were 2 different keep Trey options. One was keep Trey. The other was keep Trey with extension. And, we've talked about this a bunch. I think this is the most interesting offseason thing, what to do with Trey Hendrickson, because he might be the defensive player of the year. I don't think he's going to win the award, but he might be the defensive player of the year. And so, like you say out loud, team with bad defense has one really good player, might win the hardware. Let's trade him. At the same time, there is that dollar amount. There is the draft capital you could get. And if you're not going to extend him and you don't want the noise that comes with keeping him but not extending him, okay, let's get rid of the noise. I ultimately settled on keeping him because I think with an effective offseason, the Bengals can win the Super Bowl next year. Are there chances of doing that better with or without Trey? I think they're better with Trey. Paul, you said this to me yesterday. It's kind of like, it's another all-in thing, like keeping Tee Higgins last year. I'm not going to extend him. I am going to keep him. Am I going to get 17.5 sacks? Probably not. Am I going to get another year where he's a finalist for the Defensive Player of the Year award? Probably not. But if I do what I need to do and what I have to do on the defensive line, I think it's law of diminishing returns, where maybe less is asked of Trey, but within the context of what they're asking him to do, the overall defensive line productivity, the pass rush is just better, and Trey maybe isn't quite as statistically productive, but he's still a good player surrounded by guys who are also better. But man, there are very good arguments, and you outlined some of them. There are very good arguments for moving on from Trey and trading him and taking the money and doing a lot with it and using the draft capital, because they have a lot of areas to fix. And so when I traded Trey doing this exercise, which I didn't settle on, it was fun to have an extra 2 and maybe more than that. But I ultimately settled on keeping Trey. The 2 tough things for me on defense were, number one, I kept going back and forth between keeping Joseph Osai and putting Miles Murphy in that slot. And Paul, when you wrote your piece kind of outlining, all right, here are the free agents they could keep, within it, there are arguments just in that piece, arguments for and against keeping Joseph Osai. Because I think everybody agrees the guy is talented, and the worst thing in the world is the guy goes somewhere and blossoms, and you're like, man, we could have had him. And we left him when we had an obvious need for somebody who could help the pass rush, but the wins just aren't there. And so I ultimately put Miles Murphy in that spot. Miles Murphy had as many sacks as me, but you did use a first-round pick on him. There is a new defensive coordinator, and so I'm betting on Miles Murphy here, and maybe I shouldn't. And then the other one was what to do with Mike Hilton, because we talked about all those familiar names in the secondary. He's the one that I ultimately moved on from. But good God, what he was asked to do last year, he was really good at. You talk about, like, if you're a defensive coordinator, having one of those guys that this dude is going to set a tone, he's going to lead, all that stuff that you guys have talked about ad nauseum. I struggled with, God, I can't find room on my team for a guy in Mike Hilton who maybe in this one specific role excels, but there are reasons why they took him off the field on third downs last year. I ultimately moved on from him, but once I kept Trey, those were the 2 most difficult. Like the Murphy Osai thing, frankly, had I had a little bit more money to spend, maybe I would have kept Joseph Osai. So with Miles Murphy, it came down to money. And then ultimately, I moved on from Mike Hilton. But one of the reasons why this took me 2.5 hours to do was the back and forth with him. And the stewing over the Bearcat game too.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with Mike Hilton is the same with Trey Hendrickson, is you don't know when the cliff's coming. You know it's coming though. Mm-hmm. And if you extend these guys, like you said, Mo, do you expect him to be a defensive player of the year candidate next year? No. 17.5 sacks? No. So you're already counting on some depreciation in production next year, and then the extension would kick in after that. So that's the reason I didn't even consider keeping Mike Hilton. I moved DJ Turner into the slot, and I've got Dax, Cam, and DJ Turner. I kept Josh Newton as cornerback 4, and then I drafted a corner, another Morrison, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. I used the second-round pick that you get for Trey on him. And Paul, you mentioned the Rams, the Eagles, defensive lines. I signed 2 of those Eagles. I signed Josh Sweat, and I got Zach Bond. Zach Bond, a 2020 Senior Bowl. He was there with Logan. He was there with Hakeem. He wasn't on the team with the Bengals coaches, but they got to know him really well. He's coming on. He's really good in coverage. He's another pass rusher. I think people might not go that route and spend that kind of money at linebacker, but I think he's more than just a linebacker. And I kept Osai too. I think just the $5 million, the upside there, the reward, the risk reward is just too heavy on the reward side of keeping a Joseph Osai at just $5 million. You've got Miles Murphy too. Maybe he blows up. And then I went first round edge. I went Jalen Walker from Georgia and just really, really beefed up that defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, that's the Zach Bond. I mean, that's a really interesting thought, putting a $14 million linebacker next to Logan Wilson, something that would be a very much a change in philosophy. We haven't seen them really value that position, but I mean, Al Golden, linebackers coach, comes from that world. Maybe he sees the value in it, and adding a little bit of intensity, somebody who can be more of a versatile pass rusher and linebacker type, could be the type of player they're looking for. Whatever it is, could make sense. Let me pull away from this sheet and let you guys kind of talk through one more time on your what you guys actually went for. So Jay, I'm going to pull your sheet up since it's what you were talking about. Go ahead and talk a little bit more through what you have on offense here.
Yeah, so on offense, I dove into the guard position and I got Mekhi Becton. I think he's a guy that's kind of found his spot as a guard, and that's not a high number. That is a very affordable salary for the way he played this year. And then going back to the theme of righting wrongs, Tevin Jenkins, the number 39 pick in 2021. If the Bengals stay put at 38, they draft Tevin Jenkins. Instead, they trade back and draft Jackson Carman. That's a righting of the wrong. You get Jenkins here a few years later. He's played really well in Chicago. I kept Cody Ford. I just think his versatility on the line is solid enough. And I'm keeping Kirkland. I'm keeping Volson. Those guys are quality backups. You would hate for something to happen to Becton and Jenkins, and you'd have to go back to Volson, but he is going to be a guy in a contract year, and he's been in this league. He's played a lot of snaps, and maybe with the new offensive line coach, that they get some more production out of him. And so that's where I went there. The third round pick, I took Tez Johnson from Oregon, a wide receiver, but I'm still Yoshivas is right there in that mix as well. I went cheap at tight end. I just put Drew Sample in there. I've got $1.5 million left. That would be a bargain replacement. I think you can get a 4th, 5th round tight end to kind of fill in there with all the pieces they have on offense. It's been the case since Joe Burrow's been here. You don't need a really top end tight end, and it sucks what happened to Erick All, but I still don't think it creates a panic where they go out and they have to address that position in free agency or early in the draft.
I'm really curious to see if they are interested in going. I mean, because you trade Trey Hendrickson, but yet you pay another edge $16 million. Now he's younger, but is he as good as Trey Hendrickson? No. So it's 1 year versus multiple years. You could be on the hook. That's to me the interesting thing. Okay, if you're going to trade Trey Hendrickson, if you're going to do that, wouldn't you be just trying to do it to get younger, or the idea of doing it and then paying some unknown quantity from the outside the same amount of money essentially is a risk. And I wonder if you're better off just saying throw a bunch of young players at it and wait to see who bubbles up. I'd be curious to see, and the same thing with Zach Bond at linebacker. I'm really curious to see if they take that aggressive type of an approach with a free agency approach versus a bunch of young players approach. And getting all of those guys in the mix and just having kind of a young defense in general.
And I think, what I did in the secondary, those are all young guys. And Cam was part of that 2022 run, but a lot of these guys haven't played in big games. And that's why you get Josh Sweat from the Eagles, and you get Tershawn Wharton from the Chiefs, and you get a Zach Bond, and you get those kind of leaders that have been there and taken teams deep in the playoffs. But you're right. I'm just kind of looking at the cap hit this year. I don't know if Sweat would be a 3-year guy. Maybe they can get him for 2 years. Same with Wharton and Bond. Yeah, I don't know how those kind of play out, the length of the deals, but just looking at 2025, I really wanted to beef up the front and even the middle of the linebacker position.
All right, Mo, I'm going to bring yours on here so we can decide what we think about this. On offense, we have a lot of you have some similarities to me. I think I'm interested in I think you're going to take some heat for your offensive line philosophy here.
I might. That's fine.
I think staying
right.
young, I think just throwing a second round pick, throwing the latest, you're counting on them to hit. And then it's not going to be Jackson Carman this time, obviously, with a second round pick playing right guard, and then Cody Ford at the other one. I feel like there's going to be at least one real investment at guard. And I feel like you need that, and then you can let everybody else work it out on the other side. And I wouldn't have a problem with Cody Ford versus Cordell Volson versus second round pick versus Jackson Kirkland and all of those guys Royal Rumble duking it out. If I knew that I had something solid, the next Alex Kappa on the other side, that would be my only tweak here.
I think they should actually stage a Royal Rumble to determine who the starting guard is going to be. Very fair. Look, one of the things with Trey Hendrickson, when I kind of volleyed him back and forth between trade and not trade, is I wanted to spend money on defense because the last time they spent a lot of money on defense, I guess the last time before this past season, they spent a lot of money on defense. It worked. So I devoted a lot of resources to that side of the ball. At the same time, I did acquire a running back in free agency. I do have for nearly $4.5 million to spend. You very easily, I think, could pull that money and go make an investment at guard. I will admit that I did look at that and go, God, you know what? We're going to ride or die with Cody Ford and a second round pick at right guard. Maybe, but they have a new offensive line coach, right? Who's going to teach these guys like karate or something. That's part of his teaching. I don't know. And so he's going to coach these guys up. But yeah, man, in terms of roster building, it is glaring. I'll admit that. But I wanted to devote a lot of money to the defensive side of the ball, and I did spend on a free agent running back because I like Javonte Williams, and he's still just 24 years old, and he's a physical AFC North type rusher. But yeah, sure, man, I could certainly understand why anybody would look at that and go, really? You complain about the offensive line, and your fix is Cody Ford's going to start and a second round pick? Very fair. Very fair. What else?
I was just going to say, Milton, you will make a lot of Bengals fans happy on like March 12th.
Yeah.
Milton Williams, who might be one of the prizes of free agency, and Javon Holland, the top safety in free agency, both coming. You're taking two big, expensive swings at fixing two of the biggest issues on the roster. It would be, I think it would send some shockwaves through the league, and it certainly would be the aggressive type of move that would say we're not messing around here. Milton Williams is everything. What he's been in Philly is everything that the Bengals have missed on the defensive line in terms of a disruptive, multi-versatile defensive tackle that can do both positions, that can do a lot of things well. Would make a ton of sense there. But how expensive is he going to end up getting? What does that look like? A deep defensive tackle draft maybe could bring his number down a little bit as teams say we're not going to go pay that high expense when there's a ton of good ones in this draft. But that said, that would be a shockwave. That would top the Orlando Brown signing in terms of the Bengals sending a shockwave in free agency.
Once upon a time, they overpaid for a guy named DJ Reader.
Yeah.
And ended up being one of the best free agent signings in the history of the franchise. And so I'm going to try to run it back. Maybe the number's a little bit big. I watched how good he was against Washington, and that's not the only reason why you should want a guy on your team. But he's not a guy who, relatively speaking, has played a ton of snaps. So you've got to think there's not a ton of, quote, tread on his tires. He had a great pass rush grade this year, not so great a run grade this year, but go back to 2023, he had a really good rush grade, a run defense grade. So I really like what I did on the defensive line, which was such a weakness. I have Trey Hendrickson. I have Milton Williams, who many consider the best defensive tackle in the free agent class. I have 2 day 2 picks that we both like, or the three of us like, in Jenkins and Jackson. I'm going to use a first-round pick on an edge rusher, and I still have Myles Murphy, and you're totally fine if you want to say instead of Myles Murphy, let's put Joseph Osai there. If I've got to rebuild this defense and it's going to start from up front, that's, in my opinion at least, that's pretty damn good. Now, yes, because of the money we're giving to Milton Williams, it comes at the expense of other areas. But more than anything, when I finally printed this out, I'm like, you know what? More than anything, I have really given myself a chance to have a significantly better defensive line, overall pass rush, and better run defense. There's not a bargain basement guy. There's not a washed up dude. There's not a retread. Former first round picks, big money free agents, early round draft choices, and a guy who might be the defensive player of the year. I was really, really happy with that. And then you mentioned Javon Holland, I signed at safety. So if you go to Pro Football Focus, for all of the top listed free agents, there's a free agent comp, right? A player at the same position who in recent years elicits a comparison to this player. For Javon Holland, right wrongs, it was Jesse Bates.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And the amount of money Jesse wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which they weren't willing to pay him.
Right.
Right.
You know?
So, I mean, Jay has hit on the theme of righting wrongs. This does that. And to me is just sort of a really nice piece around which all of these young guys that remain in the secondary, Cam Taylor-Britt, DJ Turner, Dax Hill, Jordan Battle, Josh Newton, that is I think a really nice, I mean, is he the same player as Jesse Bates? No, but just imagine you could drop Jesse Bates into that group of corners and secondary and defensive backs. I think you'd feel really good about that. We can't do it with Jesse Bates. So maybe we'll find the next best thing. Javon Holland, we'll right or wrong, we'll spend money on safety. I did have Zach Bond in there at linebacker too. And then I thought of the likelihood of them doing that. And maybe because Al Golden's a linebackers coach, they totally step outside their organizational comfort zone and throw a lot of money at a linebacker in free agency. I just can't recall a time where that's actually happened. And so I went with bargain replacement because they've had such great success with, let's see, AJ Hawk and Carlos Dansby and James Harris and, like this long line of who was the guy that led the league in Preston Brown, like this long line of like, oh yeah, go get that guy to play linebacker, and it doesn't work out. But and I used a 4th round pick on linebacker as well. I ended up looking at just what I did on defense, and I was really excited about it. I'm using 2 of my top 4 picks. I've spent a lot of money. I have Al Golden coaching Logan Wilson, who, Paul, you said he thinks is the bee's knees. That's a cool reference.
It feels like something that Al Golden would use, though. He feels like the type of guy that would bee's knees somebody.
When your name is Al Golden, I guess you use bee's knees. And I kept Trey Hendrickson. I'm looking to build a league average defense. I think I did it.
Yeah, with potential to be more. All right, I'll give you guys a chance to take shots at mine. Here's mine. A lot of similar type of things. I also kept Trey Hendrickson. I don't want to be responsible for having to tell him personally that he's just going to have to play out this last year to this deal without an extension or a trade, but I'm making him do it anyway. I'll send one of the interns down there to tell him. Javonte Williams, I agree. He had the second most pass pro reps last year for Denver and was really nice in pass pro. I mean, if you're talking about a guy that you want as the backup for Chase Brown, somebody who can do that, feels like young Samaje Perine type. Loved him there filling the Zach Moss role. Kept Tee Higgins, extended him. I'm bringing back Gesicki. If you're not going to have Erick All, then run back what you did after Erick All left, and that was have the combination of Drew Sample and Gesicki and throw it a bunch and all that type of stuff. I had Becton, and I also had Dalton Risner, who is kind of a more of a bargain type of replacement type, but he would be in that Royal Rumble that you want to have when we're set up the octagon for the jiu-jitsu and all that stuff. I think he's in there with Cody Ford, with Jackson Kirkland, with Cordell Volson, and see if he can hang on there. I think you throw all of those guys in there, but Dalton would sort of be like my free agent answer to that thing. Jedrick Wills is really interesting as the 3rd tackle. Cleveland 1st round pick. Guess what you have? A guy that knew him really well now as the offensive line coach, who maybe can get some of that 1st round talent or some comfort level with him there to bring, knowing his personality, that could have him come in as your backup for Mims and Brown, I think is an interesting one too. I'm keeping Sam Hubbard on the restructure. Neither of you guys did that. He was really good against the run last year when he was just doing that. He's not my starter. I have him as edge 3. He's probably more like edge 4, but I just wanted to make sure he was on there. But I have a first-round pick at edge opposite Trey Hendrickson. James Pierce out of Tennessee. Miles Murphy's still here. Give me Hubbard in the background doing gritty run things and kind of like being around as a captain and all that stuff for $3 million. I'm here for that. You're not asking him to play what he has played in previous years. You're turning that over to the kids. But let Sam Hubbard continue to be an example for that first-round pick and everything else. Poona Ford is my secret of this free agency period. At defensive tackle, disruptive, run-stopping defensive tackle, kind of a beast. I just liked him in recent years. You could throw him in there and then throw some picks around him and your young guys, and you can have some fun, I think, which I have Walter Nolan from Ole Miss in the second round being in the mix there. And then I just threw Cody Barton, another $3 million linebacker next to Logan Wilson because they're both cowboy types. He's from Utah. Logan Wilson's from Wyoming. I'm sure they'll bond over that, and we'll all write stories about it. I have them spending on Cam Bynum at safety, but really staying young in the secondary. I think that, and you kind of do a lot of everything, and you still have some money left to fill out the rest of the roster. I think it's possible to do a lot there. So I look at it and I feel like I didn't take any of the big swings really, Mo, like you did on defense, but it feels like you are throwing new and youth at it in that combination.
Yeah. I mean, even you could look at the secondary, and I messed around with the idea of them signing Mike Hughes from Atlanta to play corner, but you're not talking about like Saturday picks there at corner, right? I mean, you are talking about guys that they drafted with the idea that by now they would be contributing players, more in some cases more than contributing players. And so I'm going to take a little bit of a leap of faith in those guys, but okay, if I get from at least some of them what I think I can, I think I've built a really good defense. I will admit to you this, because I finally stopped this at 2:47 this morning. And went to bed. No. And I'll admit to you, like I laid in bed for 5 minutes and I'm like, man, I did that exercise. I got $4.4 million available. So maybe that could be Sam Hubbard. I mean, and then the other one that, as I look at it here, and I see yours, Paul, with Andre Yoshivas, I desire to see somebody at wide receiver 3 who can do a little bit more than just catch touchdowns, but you could certainly argue on my sheet, 3rd round pick at wide receiver when you've extended Jamar and T, and you have Mike Gesicki, who is basically a wide receiver. That's a little bit of a luxury pick, and maybe we could use that somewhere else. But I went into this thinking I was going to have to overhaul the defense and invest heavily in the defense. And for me, at least, even with some money to spend, even with some very fair questions about what I've chosen to do on the offensive line, I'm pretty happy with the unit that I've built on that side of the football.
Yeah, you guys both did what was kind of maybe my biggest regret, my biggest question, and you went with the veteran Bynum and Holland at safety. And I was like, do we have to put a guy that, one's a 4-year starter, one's a 3-year starter? Do you need a guy like that in there? Or are you willing to let all these young guys, these up-and-comers, kind of grow together and see who emerges as the leader back there? And I just figured with the going so heavy on the D-line and then with Zach Bond that you're not going to have to – you still have to cover in this league. But affecting the quarterback up front, I think, will help that back end. And I think there's something to that, having all those young guys that have kind of come in together, grow together as a group. I thought that was a concession you could make and not go get a really expensive veteran guy to put in the back end at safety.
End of the day, I think that this was easier than I thought it would be. But I think this is the one year where you do say, like, but how are they going to be able to structure it and be comfortable with the cash numbers? And I think that's where you find that the Bengals are going to have to figure things out, because this feels easy, but it's not easy when you throw in the amount of cash outlay that they're going to have to do to make Jamar and T with what they still have with Burrow happen, and not, because they're not going to go be like the Browns and have restructured and deferred all this money and have the most expensive cash roster in the history of the National Football League. And so how much can they do from a like trying to keep the year under control cash aspect when in free agency, if they do things like give extensions to T and Jamar with the Burrow money. I think that's something that would be better for Duke Tobin or Katie Blackburn to answer. So if we hear from them, we can ask them about that.
The one thing for me as we talk about this is I did not spend really any time with Tee Higgins not on my spreadsheet. And I might do the exercise on my own, but a different exercise is if you do move on from him, because then there's my offensive line, and there's maybe money for a good wide receiver who's perhaps not Tee Higgins but can blossom into that role with Joe Burrow throwing passes to him, or I can go find a corner in free agency and maybe bet on them instead of one of these guys who's still largely unproven. That's the part of this exercise that I guess I just early on settled on him being a Bengal next year, but I legitimately might go back and do this and go, okay, let's move on from T and see what that looks like. Cause it is an insane amount of money. When you're looking at, the other things I would like to accomplish. And I mean, God knows we haven't talked about Tee Higgins enough, right? But relative to how much we talked about what they may or may not do, I spent, and maybe you guys were the same, very little time exploring what I could do with T's money and what I could do at his position.
I mean, look at the AFC Championship, okay? 2 elite quarterbacks, and what did they have at receiver? Keon Coleman, right? Xavier Worthy making plays, a mid-tier receiver, Curtis Samuel, exactly. You had a bunch. They invested in rookies and a couple of mid-tier guys, Marquise Hollywood Brown, right? They offset and they said, we're going to count on the quarterback to carry us. And these were 2 teams that had good defenses, good offensive lines that they paid and took care of and skimped at receiver. And I've been making we talk about how you go back and forth the Tee Higgins thing. Like I'm with you guys. I did the same thing, but I think it's hard not to watch that AFC Championship and say, look what they're doing with their elite quarterbacks. And maybe that's different here, but I just think you see it. You could see it going either way, especially when that stood out to me over the course of the watching the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and look what they're doing with those high-priced defenses too, giving up 32 and 29 points, and it is a good argument. But I'm with Mo. I did not even. I might do it just to see what it looks like by not keeping T, because I think that is definitely I still have it as a 50-50 proposition whether they do or not. But I didn't when I made the sheet. He was one of the first decisions.
So
for the extension.
I've just pulled mine up right now, and for the sake of maybe making a trade, I swapped out Tee Higgins for Josh Palmer, right? So it's essentially everybody's talked about, well, T could go to LA and play for the Chargers and the Bengals get Josh Palmer, right? And I just $6 million. Okay. So reasonably established player comes to Cincinnati, and is he going to be Tee Higgins? No, maybe not, but he's going to have Joe Burrow throwing passes to him and Jamar Chase on the other side. So I've replaced Tee Higgins with Josh Palmer. I still have a 3rd-round pick on a wide receiver, and suddenly on my sheet now I have $21.4 million to spend. Well, okay, so we could take Cody Ford and we can turn him into Tevin Jenkins, and now I still have $13.9 million to spend. All right, cool. I could take that guard, that 2nd-round pick, and I can turn that into hell. Let's have fun with it. Kevin Zeitler, and I still got $7.9 million. So
it adds up.
We've made the T thing black and white and about a lot of things that really matter, right? Like what he's done for the team, his importance to it, his popularity, how much Joe likes him. The fact that he's just the kind of person that you want to have in your locker room, all that stuff matters. But then you do it from this perspective and you look at it a little bit more mathematically. holy hell, I can get a wide receiver as a free agent. I could still use a pick on one. I can get something out of the likes of guys like Andre Yoshivas, and then I can really get to work. And just the exercise that I did, I've signed 2 free agents on the offensive line, and I've spent a lot of money on defense. And I haven't traded Trey Hendrickson. So, like, it was sort of irresponsible of me to not even look at what life without. And I prefer Tee Higgins on the team because let's try it Joe's way, right? And I do think I think I've done it. I've made the team better while keeping Tee Higgins. But I think folks who do this exercise should do one with T, one without. Because with T, cool, you have Tee Higgins, and you can still cut a lot of guys, but you can also cut a lot of guys, move on from Tee Higgins, find a replacement, and then go to town with the money.
Yep.
But that's why this offseason, and that's why these decisions are so fascinating.
And that's why this has been so fun to put it together. Mo, I won't waste any more of your time. I apologize that you were up till 2:30 in the morning with a bourbon, taking in a loss and deciding to dive even further into this. It's always a fun exercise, and I hope that you're not too beat up by it.
Have you ever seen a team miss 3
front
ends of 1-and-1s?
Don't do it, Mo. Don't do it.
In my life, watching and playing basketball, I've never seen that. You get 3 fouls, 7, 8, and 9. You go to the line for a 1-and-1. We missed all 3 1-and-1s. How on earth do you do that?
It was not a stellar performance from the Bearcats.
How do you save a ball that's going out of bounds that's clearly off the other team and decide I'm going to leap into the scorer's table and bring it back in? What are we doing?
It's hard to put together other than to say that this is very bad and it feels very lost. But I won't make you go there. Please listen to Mo from 3 to 6 on ESPN 1530 if you want to hear him emote a little bit more about the University of Cincinnati Bearcats. Thanks, Mo. Appreciate it.
Guys, good to see you. Thank you.
See you.
All right, Jay. Big exhale there. Okay. Mock off season. We did it. There was a lot there. I understand that. Go to The Athletic. Download. You can do it on Google Sheets. You can do it on Microsoft Excel, of course, and get in there and get in the sheets and do it all for yourself. Spend 2.5 hours if you want. Kill your productivity. Do it quickly, whatever. I do recommend it. It's fun. It offers some pretty good perspective, I think, on the offseason. If you've done it in the past, you know that. But just go to the site there and you can do it yourself. Let's touch on some of the news tidbits here for what's kind of gone on. First of all, the Al Golden press conference. It was long. He did one-on-ones afterwards. It was a lot of meet Al Golden, but we've kind of already met him a little bit. And then what's your takeaway, Jay, kind of from the intro press conference for Al Golden?
Yeah, I thought your question was really interesting about the transferable nature of schemes in college. And then some other questions kind of went into the NIL part of it and, you know, free agency and salary cap. And it's the lines are so blurred with college and pro now. And I thought that was really interesting. And where I think you mentioned it in your story, where one of his linebackers at Notre Dame is older than 3 of the linebackers currently on the Bengals roster. And it just, you know, we talked about it forever. It always felt like he was going to be the guy. It feels like the perfect fit. And maybe my biggest takeaway is that it took the press conference lasted as long as it did, because so much was talked about Al before he got here, and he wasn't new. Everybody in there, well, I think pretty much everybody in the press conference was covering the team when he was here. So it wasn't like a get to know you kind of thing, but it's the biggest thing. How do they fix this defense? So a lot of questions about what that looks like. And, you know, it's going to take a while for him to dive back in and get more specific. But I thought it was telling that why he is the fit, not just because, again, what you wrote about with the ties to Cincinnati, but just what a smooth transition it feels like it's going to be to go from Notre Dame defensive coordinator to Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator.
We'll see. I agree. I found a lot of the, when I wasn't expected him to go to the games that they had just watched that weekend with the scheme stuff, being like, look, watch the games on Sunday, watch the AFC Championship game, watch the Eagles. Like, what are defenses trying to do? They're trying to stop zone reads design QB runs, like all of this same stuff. There's so much scheme transfer now from college to pro, and I think that's why you see so much of that, where there's been so many success stories. It's just so similar. I mean, colleges have GMs now, like all that other stuff that's going. I mean, it's very, you got to go into the portal, you got to find your free agents, you got to be able to develop freshmen like they did. You know, him talking about the pride that they had with 5 freshmen that played big time minutes for them this past year as they dealt with injuries and stuff. It's the same thing as rookies coming in and having to do it. I mean, it's just like the fact that he had success here on the pro level as the linebackers coach. He's run entire teams before in college, Temple, Miami, and then what he did at Notre Dame. I mean, his resume certainly speaks. And I feel like personality wise, you know, certainly people would have classified Lou Anarumo as a no nonsense truth teller, as he kind of talked about that in his Indianapolis press conference. But like, I feel like this is a little bit of what they were looking for, a little bit of new energy. He's big energy. He's like, you know, all about pounding in on these details. And I thought it was interesting him talking about needing to work harder in the off season and focus more on that, which isn't obviously the way he talked about it. Sounded like Zach Taylor and I have been talking about ways to fix the offseason, and we believe maybe working a little bit harder, or maybe I believe that working a little bit harder is going to have to be part of that there. And so that stood out to me as well, because that's going to be a big question when we get into the spring and summer months.
Yeah, I mean, even working harder, but it kind of what he was saying too leaned in what Zach has been more about in the offseason, where he was talking about the install and making it more of a mental off season and drilling that stuff, so you're not pulling stuff out later in the season. And you know, with the portal thing, or the portal thing as well, where you don't just have to go out and get free agents, you have to find a way to pay your current guys so they don't leave, just like a Trey Hendrickson, that type of thing. So just so much of it just really felt like it fit.
Yep. Let's flip forward here to the Erick All news again. I kind of had this yesterday, this has been something that's been known for a while now, I guess, internally, but kind of took a while to get it all pinned down to exactly what was going on. But yeah, Erick All expected to miss the 2025 season now. I mean, this was part of the issue, I think, and why you saw him available in the 4th round, despite the talent, was there were questions about this knee and what had happened with his ACL that he tore in Iowa, and if that would hold up or whatever. And that was a risk. There was a higher risk of re-injury with it. He also had the back issue, but it all sounded like that the back wasn't as much of a problem, and it has proven not to be an issue for Erick All. But when he re-injured it, they go in and deem that this has got complications. It's much more complicated than just a simple ACL. It's actually going to require 2 surgeries. He's already had one. Another one's coming in the coming months. And so that's essentially when you kind of restart the ACL timeline once he has the 2nd surgery. And that's how you end up pushing back and missing this year. And they hope to have him as full Erick All, who you saw pre-injury for the 2026 season. But let's be honest. I mean, that's the hope. You hope that he can pick right up, and that's where it goes. That's what they believe it will go. But you know, this is obviously not your standard situation medically.
Yeah, and never good. I mean, guys miss seasons, early seasons, season-ending injuries, that type of thing. But to miss half a season and then a whole nother season, it's hard to come back. That rust is there, and he's not a guy that's got a lot of NFL reps to lean on. So you wonder where that's going to be. But then on the other hand, think about how impressive. I mean, he was impressive anyhow. He was one of the most impressive rookies they had last year. But doing that on coming off of a surgery that wasn't correct, that needed correction, and not just the way he played, but I think he exceeded expectations of how quickly he came back. There was a lot of talk about maybe this would be a redshirt year, and he got back out there in training camp and was contributing and on the field. And so I think that gives you some encouragement that he knows how to rehab this injury, and he's not afraid to work, and he's going to do what he can to get back. But that it's a lot to ask to miss that much time, and this will be another, a 3rd surgery. That's going to be tough.
Yeah, and I mean, you go back through the timeline of like, is this just kind of who he's going to be? I mean, he had the back thing at Michigan, misses half the season essentially. Iowa, his last year there, he plays 7 and misses the last 7 games this season. Now his rookie year in the NFL, he misses half the season. Now he's going to miss his entire. It's been 4 straight years where you can't complete a full season of football. That's a lot. Here's the thing that I will say: if you tell me, and I want to make clear, I'm not saying that this is where it's going to go. I think it's going to go. But if you told me now, it ended up being career ending, right? Like, if you told me that, I'd still go back in time and take that chance with the 4th round pick. A 4th round pick, I'm taking that flyer.
Yeah.
Like, I am, for what he was and is and can be still, the injury dice roll, that's what day 3 picks are about. And and when you saw the talent and the type of player that he is, and they hope he can be still, I think it's still worth the risk. It's what day 3 picks are for. And so I would go back and do it again if it were me. And they hope that they won't have to worry about that conversation, that in 2026 he'll look exactly like the guy he was, and they can start forming their offense around his skill set yet again. Let's go Growler Bet. So we did the last Growler Bet we did, Jay, was back before the Al Golden hire, and we were seeing if anybody knew the date that the news would break. And what date did that end up being, Jay?
Your story with the breaking of the news was January 22nd. So kudos to you for not sitting on it for another week just so you would win the Growler Bet.
Yeah, I didn't think I could hold it that long.
Yeah, because you went January 29th, I went January 28th, so I edged you out there. But January 22nd was the date, and you cut it off last Friday, said no more submissions once it kind of got out there that it was either going to be Golden or Graham, which is a great cereal, by the way. 7 guys had the right answer. So you want to read them? You want me to read them?
Go for it, Jay.
Yeah, so Lonnie Weishar, R.C. Sprague, Drew England, Wade Harwood, Joe Hyde, Peter Jakes, and yes, John Harth, we are going to allow you to be in this tiebreaker. Paul had cut it off at noon on the 19th. John Harth came in at 12:46, but that's close enough. And we don't know when he actually listened to Who They Like to know that it had been cut off. So those 7 guys all had January 22nd.
So close, but we're going to allow it because you're still so close. All of you are still so close. Okay, you haven't won anything yet. What you have done, though, is gotten yourself into a tiebreaker. So I need all of you to email me. I'll send out an email to you as well. The Super Bowl winner and final score. Need your Super Bowl score. Whoever comes closest with the winner will win the Growler Bet, which will be we can do the Bet MGM Nation Kitchen and Bar gift card, or we can come up with something else that maybe the Graders Worthy gift pack. That feels like that's where we should go with this, Jay. Actually, this has been so much work. Graders Worthy gift pack is what we're going on with this. We will send you the Graders shipper, the 6-pint shipper that can go to anyone. So this is going to be a Graders Worthy Growler Bet. We're going with it. Which, by the way, Jay, have you had the Graders Skyline? If you are in Cincinnati and in any way associated with the media or an influencer, you had to get in front of a camera and talk about tasting the Graders Skyline combo. Did you do it?
I have not yet, but I want to. I will get that done, but I'm a little behind right now.
I have done it. I gotta say, I like it. I am a big fan of the oyster crackers mixed in. That's a nice touch. I'm an oyster cracker guy anyway.
Yeah.
So big fan of the oyster crackers, but it's got that, like, you can taste the sky. It's kind of like their Grater's cinnamon ice cream, but with a little extra pizzazz to it. So you can really taste that cinnamon ice cream in there. You drop the crackers in there. Really, really liked it. I'm a fan. Had it, and I said I'd do it again, and then I went back, and sure enough, I went back to the pint the next night. So I'm fairly predictable that way, but I like it. I'm here for it. Some people might not be, but I am. I'm also, I'm their core audience at this point, no doubt.
Would you put hot sauce on it?
No,
it's
I would
weird
not.
On ice cream,
not a cracker bomb. I'm not gonna cracker bomb. This is an interesting thought, though.
Yeah.
A hot sauce drizzle on the ice cream. Hadn't thought about that. Maybe that's the move that you should make. Very interesting thought. Do you have any Arby's?
Yeah, I do. So this past Saturday, James Rapine at SI.com threw a little party for all of us, an end of season party. So Russ Heltman, Andrew Fox Miller, Elise Jesse, we all got together and we started at a golf simulator. I keep going back to the famous, in my mind, the famous line from Jeff Hobson from Bengals.com when he's talking about the Bengals players. Never let them see you do anything athletic, because they are so much more, even when they're doing stuff that is, the softball tournament, that stuff, they look a little uncoordinated, but still nothing compared to what us schleps are. So we do this golf simulator. We had it for 2 hours. We got through 3 holes. It was a struggle. Let's just say that. Russ Heltman was really good. The rest of us, not so much. So it was a lot of fun. After that, we had some pizza. We watched UC and Xavier games on TV, did some bar hopping. And I just want to give a shout out to all the people that came up to us in the bars and talked about how much they liked the coverage and everything. And I just want to apologize too, because late in the evening, the drinks started taking the toll, and I wasn't necessarily super interested in engaging in Bengals talk at that point in the night. And I might have been a little dismissive of people, but I was very appreciative of everybody that came up and said hello and just passed along plaudits of how much they enjoy the coverage.
Jay is one of the kindest people you'll ever meet until he drinks. Rah, rah, rah. No, just kidding.
Blame the shots.
No, I get it. Once the occasional shot drops in, then it just changes. It changes the dynamic a little bit.
Does.
That's all. That's all right. I have one, and it's a specific Arby's for you.
Oh,
Jay, and that is: do you know about the Microsoft Excel World Championship?
No, I'm interested.
Oh yeah. So you qualify throughout the year, and it tests who is the best in the country at working Microsoft Excel and formulas and everything. The finals are in Las Vegas in December. I discovered this. I saw like highlights of it. It was highlights from the Microsoft Excel World Championship. They're all in this big, ballroom, and it's TVs and Excel spreadsheets everywhere. And it's who can, solve some formulaic equation or whatever layout fastest. There's qualifying. It's Excel Esports, which is a competition where participants solve unusual game tasks in Excel, not finance, just Microsoft Excel and logical thinking skills. And it transforms a common office tool into a dynamic sport, bringing together a global community of enthusiasts to compete, learn, and celebrate the power of Excel. This is made for you. This is made for you. I mean, now, really, they should all have to put together the mock off-season sheet for the actual World Championship. I'm telling you, I'm signing you up. I'm signing you up to enter in one of the regionals. It's an online regional. You go on, and whoever has the best scores ends up winning a trip to Vegas to qualify for the finals. The top 5 participants from each of the Excel Esports battles qualify. I'm just saying, I feel like you can do this. I've seen you at work. I know the work that you've put in, and I know how good you are with the sheets. I'm saying, I'm putting you in. I need you to try and see if you can pull it off.
This kind of goes back to the golf simulator, where it's something I really enjoy, but I have no delusions that I could win anything like that. Never let them see you do anything intelligent. I would love to watch it, but I know I do a lot of Googling of how to do this in Excel. I don't know how to just do that stuff off the top of my head. I can always figure it out, but I don't think I would have the speed and the ability to even come close to competing in something like that. But I am definitely going to watch it.
Well, not with that attitude.
The man who the man who thinks he can and the man who thinks he can't are both right. That's been my advice to my kids all growing up.
That's right.
Yeah, now I'm going
maybe a little bit of practice is something that you need to be considering. If it's about remembering, so get in there and get in the sheets. Okay, go be a champion today. All right. That's what I'm saying. For the pep talk. I want to see you in the Microsoft Excel World Championship. So, all right, that's my Arby's. It was the day of the sheet. I had to end with that. It was the day of the sheet, which you and I we concocted this thing together back, and I'm happy to see that it's kind of become a thing. I love all the listeners and the readers that have been clamoring, when are we going to see it? When are the sheets going to come out? And it's kind of felt like it's a little thing that everybody looks forward to. And I appreciate everybody that has reached out, fills them out, and sends us your screenshots. Send us your screenshots of what you guys came up with, and I'll dig further into those, and we'll analyze those in some future times. But more to come. Who Day Light will be back on Friday, so make sure you check back in for that, and we'll be back next week with more goodness as we keep trekking into the off season. All right, thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you next time.